Welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 174th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 628th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, June 18th, 2020. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms, and let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And for me, I'm going to start with something on Race Thompson, who will actually be the main focus in the middle of the show, but we'll give him headlines here for a different reason. Race was one of 7 Hoosiers named to the Big Ten's new anti-hate and anti-racism coalition that was set up and announced this week by Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren. Among the quotes that was in the release about this, Warren said, "We have the distinct opportunity and responsibility through our coalition to continually encourage, educate, and empower our student athletes as we embrace transparent and much-needed dialogue regarding meaningful issues that have impacted race relations for many years." And the Big Ten, I think, for as many things as we've been able to criticize them for over the years, I think has really handled everything going on now as well as any league in the country. And I'm really proud of what they've done with getting people from every school to be part of this. And Race, as everyone will probably remember, when the team put out their statement on everything that was going on in the country, Race was the guy who talked first, talked about being at the protests in Minneapolis, the one that a truck drove into. But clearly that's something that is important to him and important to his family, because his dad, Daryl, helped organize at least one, I think multiple protests in the Minneapolis area. And so I think good for Race to be included in this, good for him to already show his awareness and passion about these issues. And I think as we look at the bigger picture of that quote I read talked about student athletes and what the college experience is all supposed to be about. I think this is another way above and beyond athletics that can be something that's really important for Race as he moves forward, and really for the league as a whole. So I'm interested to see what they do with this and what action comes of this anti-hate and anti-racism coalition. But kudos to the Big Ten for putting this together, and congrats to Race for being one of the guys who was named to be on it. And with that, let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left,
he remembers the days when a movie cost $1. Heaven help you if you ever decide to pop your collar. Play hard, but remember, fake hustle is a crime. He's the coach and it's Tonsoni time.
Coach, what's on your mind this week?
Well, to piggyback on your banner moment, kudos to Indiana for renaming the Intramural Center after Bill Garrett. We had a show a couple weeks ago where Bill Murphy talked about his importance to Indiana basketball. It's nice to see Bill get recognized and his family to be recognized for his contributions to Indiana University and to Indiana University basketball. And then obviously voluntary workouts started today. It was nice. One of the things I do like to see video clips of is the weight room being opened up and unlocked by Cliff Marshall and getting everyone in and getting their bodies back into some sort of a routine, because if there is going to be a season, and we're really hoping that there will be one, You missed out on some workouts and things, and getting the body right in order to go to July when the NCAA is now going to let the team have some formal workouts. You need to get ready, and I'm sure Cliff Marshall will do the job. And it's just nice to see something coming back in Indiana basketball, and that door opening up to the weight room was really good to see.
Yeah, agreed. I'm glad also to see that Cliff Marshall has found the sweet spot of getting Coach to get excited about these social media posts. So good for him. Kudos to Cliff for that. And then to my right,
analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the answers.
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
This is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, what is your rant on the last week in IU hoops?
Man, it's tough. It's been a little bit of time since I've been on here, and there hasn't been a ton of news. But I think that Coach kind of stole my thunder a little bit that I was going to talk about Cliff Marshall opening the weight room. I think so it's good, Coach. We're on the same page. I think that's a great thing to see. Obviously, as long as everyone's being safe and smart, as we've seen throughout the country, things are kind of ramping back up again, which is a good thing. You're seeing like businesses open and things like that, but at the same time, you're seeing virus cases tick back up. So I just want to make sure that everybody at IU is being safe and smart. And I think, we've already seen that they have a ton of protocols in place, which is good. I just, look, I really want basketball to start up this fall. I think everybody does. It's just, it's tough to see, the direction some of this stuff is going. So hopefully that continues to be, as far as athletics goes, we continue to hear good news. And also I think that you're right, Amy, the news that Race was put on that board, that the Big Ten committee is a huge deal. And I think that, especially it's not like he's a guy who is starred as an all Big Ten player and they put him on because he's a name. He's a guy who a lot of people don't know who he is. And so I think it's a good chance for him to sort of distinguish himself, entering what is going to be a huge year for him that we're going to talk about tonight.
All right, so with that, here's what we're going to talk about this week. We've got a few college hoops headlines, not too many. The bulk of the show will be on our Race Thompson player preview. Want to make sure we did that while Ryan was here as president of the Race Thompson fan club. So a few different angles to hit with
just know
Race.
That it's unofficial. I haven't declared myself the president of that. It's unofficial. But I feel like we all know the way the winds are blowing.
I feel like it's official. And then we got a handful of questions from you, so we'll hit all that this week on Assembly Call Radio. Before we get to all that, a few quick announcements. First, please continue to support our friends at Home Field. So you can go to homefieldapparel.com and use the promo code Assembly20 at checkout to save 20% off your order. I know they've got a lot of great things going on there. So make sure you check that out. They just had a flash sale earlier this week. I was forbidden based on the number of other things that I've bought from there recently. I saw it come through in my email. I was like,
you're an addict.
I was like, Home Field's having a flash sale. And my wife was like, do you really need, that was on the heels of, I think, one of the weeks before, my older daughter was like, are you going to wear a Home Field shirt every day of the week? And I was like, well, I came pretty close. I picked up a couple others. So, anyway. So outfit yourself for the summer. Homefieldapparel.com. Assembly20 is the promo code. So with that, guys, headlines. So tonight, earlier, Trey Patterson committed to Villanova. I don't think that was really a surprise based on any of the things that I had looked at. So in that regard, it was nice to be in his final three, but I don't know that anybody really had great designs on him coming to IU. I guess, Ryan, with that as backdrop, how much does this really shift IU's focus? It was already pretty heavy on Trey Kaufman. They've been talking about Mason Miller, Mike Miller's son, potentially being interested there. Does this really just focus that much more attention on those guys, or what do you think kind of the next dominoes are with that commitment tonight?
Yeah, I think it does, and I think that the guy they're looking for is Trey Kaufman. I mean, I think that's. He's the guy that everybody's kind of aiming towards that's going to determine this recruiting class a little bit. And I really think that I don't think that's changed with Trey Patterson committee. I think that Trey Kaufman was always the guy that everybody was looking at and trying to see, would he be the guy would he be the next domino to fall? Obviously, you got Logan Duncombe in there, and I think that was quicker than some people expected, and Trey Kaufman's taking a little bit longer. But if you look at the way things are trending, I think that Indiana's in a really good position. But the longer it goes, the more worrisome it becomes because somebody else could sneak in there. And I think that Indiana's in a good place, but you never know. And I do think there's some interesting developments with Mason Miller, and a lot of people are saying that Indiana's trending really well for him, especially after his dad is no longer an assistant at Memphis, where everyone thought he was going to go. So we'll see where it goes, but I don't think there's any reason those two guys couldn't play on the floor at the same time. So I don't think that it's if you get one, you don't get the other. But I do think it's interesting that maybe Indiana's ramping up its pursuit of Mason Miller to sort of push Trey Kaufman and make a decision. That happens a lot in recruiting. It's, hey, if you don't come, we've got this guy. So, you got to make a decision. But I'm not saying that's happening, but I just, maybe that's part of it, because Drake Hoffman is taking a while to make the decision. And people thought that he would be at the beginning of the summer, would make his decision, or in the spring at some point. And he hasn't yet. There's no indication he's going to make it anytime soon. But again, coronavirus has thrown all of this off, so we don't really know what's going on there.
Yeah, agreed. And those are really the forward targets. From a guard perspective, you've still got Blake Wesley, Aminu Muhammad. Those are kind of the names to know on that front. But yeah, it's interesting to see. I think it was on Podcast on the Brink when Alex talked to Corey Evans from Rivals, and how he had kind of said, with some guys, this ramps it up because they're just kind of tired of the process. You can't look at stuff. Some people, it drags it out a little bit more because you can't do all the kind of normal recruiting things that you'd want to do as a potential recruit. So it's kind of an odd mix there of how the situation is leading to that. Another one, just some clarity on something we mentioned last week. Talked about a potential big man recruit reclassifying Brandon Lieb, I think is how you say this. Doesn't seem to be an indication at this point that IU has or hasn't yet offered a scholarship. They may not. Something to keep an eye on. Just another, I guess, name to watch, but didn't seem like a whole lot there. And then the other was really the NCAA overall plan for summer activities. Beginning July 20th, required summer athletics activities may begin and can last up to 8 weeks or until the school's first day of classes or September 15th, whichever is earlier. Required virtual non-physical activities can continue to be conducted during this period. Virtual and in-person activities cannot exceed a combined 8 hours per week. And then the note that, as you guys had already mentioned, IU's men's basketball players will be allowed to begin voluntary workouts on Thursday, June 18th, which is today. So, Ryan, we talked a little bit about this before we got on. You had just written something for the Big Lead on Texas, where today they had a number of players, I think 10 or maybe it was 13, test positive for the coronavirus. And, none of that's happened yet at IU. We hope that it doesn't. But I think some of the underlying things that we talked about a little bit before we came on are probably pertinent here. So didn't know if you wanted to share anything that you had, kind of gathered as you put that together.
Yeah, I just wrote that, look, if they want to have football, I think football is going to be harder to contain than anything else. Basketball, you can it's a smaller roster. You can kind of keep everyone isolated. Football, especially college football, you got 100 guys on the roster. And for, the NFL, it's 53 plus support staff and all that other stuff. So it gets up around 70 something if you include practice squad and all that. That's a lot of people to keep contained and keep, healthy and keep tested and all that. And I just said that if the NFL and the NCAA want to have football this fall, and a lot of people do want to have football, they're just going to have to accept the fact that there's going to be a lot of positive tests, because if one guy gets it, you're going to see a lot of guys get it. If one offensive lineman gets it, with the amount of time that those guys spend in a room together and spend working out together and spend next to each other in practice and spend on the field together, everybody's probably going to get it. And so the NFL and the NCAA, if they're approaching this as if they're definitely going to have football, and that's what they're doing, they need to prepare themselves and prepare the public for the fact that a lot of guys are going to test positive. And this just, if they're going to treat it just like an ankle injury where, yep, he tested positive, he's going to be out 2 weeks, he'll be back after that. They need to approach it in a way that confirms that that's going to happen, because it is. And I think you're going to see kids in every sport test positive for this, and just the way it's going. And we either need to decide, sort of as a society and them as an organization, speaking of the NCAA right now, if that's okay. And if it is, then we need to treat it like, oh, well, he tested positive, he'll be out a couple weeks, and move on. Or it's going to be, more guys tested positive, they should shut this down because it's going to spread really quickly. I mean, we need to decide which way we're going to go on this and how we're going to approach it. And frankly, leadership from those organizations of how they're going to approach it would help. And they sort of almost seem to be ignoring the fact that it's going to get worse as they bring more people back. I mean, with Texas, 13 guys tested positive and only 58 were on campus. That's an insanely high percentage. So, I mean, again, need to prepare for this. This is going to happen. And it was shocking when Texas released that report. They're going to be more like it coming right after. So I just think that the NCAA, the NFL, all these sports groups need to be prepared for the tidal wave that's coming, because it'll happen.
Yeah, and the interesting thing from a coaching perspective is how do you run your program? Whether it's football, basketball, the summer in the off season is really a good time to get in and work individually, work in small groups, and those are limited. And if you have some new situations as far as what you can do and what you can't do, that's going to be interesting coming up in July for basketball purposes when they can have their formal workouts. And it's just it's a time to fix the fundamentals, whether it be shooting, ball handling, defense, whatever. Get some team stuff done, and it's just an important part. I'm sure that's the same for football and all the other sports as well. That it's just going to be interesting to see how formal and how much these things can play to the advantage of the teams, like it would be as a normal summer, and it's just not going to be normal. But the NCAA coming out and allowing coaches to work and possibly allowing coaches to go see some recruits in August. Again, I always operate if it's safe, let's go do it and get back to normal as much as possible. But the summer is when you make yourself as a player, basketball-wise. And I always wondered if Cook Hall was open. It seemed like that sign today from Coach Marshall is that the building was off limits. When is the building open for players just to come in on their own and put up shots? Is that part of the involuntary or the voluntary stuff, formal stuff? It'll be interesting to see as that comes out. But again, keep safety in mind. But boy, it sure would be nice to be able to do both. Be as safe as we can as a society and get sports back, because it's such a big part of all of us, and especially Indiana with the football season the way it's supposed to be, and then basketball, the excitement in both sports.
Yep. All right. Well, coming up, we are going to look ahead to Race Thompson's junior season. His career at IU has been marred by frustrating injury issues, but the Hoosiers' best stretches of play have often come with him on the floor. So what can we expect next season? We'll discuss it next. Stick with us.
What's going on? It's Christian Wofford. What's the only thing better than an epic buzzer beater? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join my guys Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU game. Go Hoosiers.
All right. Thank you, Christian. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcasts or watch those replays and see all the between segment banter, then check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and the coach Brian Tonsoni, and it is now time to continue with our player preview series. And up next is Race Thompson. So Race, I think everybody was excited about already. But the departure of Justin Smith has put Race's at least potential role in a different light with that. And so, Coach put together a few numbers. Overall in the season, he averaged a little bit over 13 minutes a game, but he did play over 20 minutes in 6 of the last 10 following that Michigan State injury where he took a hard fall and injured his back. So I think that at least maybe during that stretch is a little bit of a taste of what we might be able to get from him. So I guess that's maybe the best place to start, just in terms of, what his minutes ascend to this year. Now we'll talk the injury stuff in a little bit, but Coach, I'll throw this to you first. 'Cause I know this has been a few weeks ago, you had put together a spreadsheet just to kind of play with some different lineup combinations and things like that. So as you try to project minutes across this team, and for Race in particular, how does he kind of shake out? Where do you think the sweet spot is with playing time for him?
I'm going to say in the low 20s to 22 to 26 minutes, depending on health and matchups, because in looking at the minutes today, he played in 20 or more minutes, 6 games, and a couple of them were high teens, 17, 18. So he was getting more run towards the end of the season. I thought Indiana was playing its better basketball. It didn't necessarily mean they won every game, but the losses were close. They were a lot more competitive in their last 10 games than they had in a stretch of losses in midseason. And I thought Race was a big part of that. And then when you take Justin Smith's minutes out and you're looking at, a 4 or 5 rotation of maybe 3 players right now that you know of, And then is a wing going to step down and play some four like a Jerome or Geronimo or someone? You got a 3-man rotation right now until we see how it plays out. I think those minutes are going to go up. So he averaged 13.8 minutes. I see that's going to be over 20 just because the minutes are available, but also because I think he's going to be a key part of Indiana's success. And it might not be statistics. It might not be double-digit points. I think his points will go up. As he's more aggressive, I think his rebounds will go up, but he just seems to be a glue guy, an energy guy. Throw out whatever cliche you want, that Indiana just seemed to flow better in everything they tried to do offensively and defensively when he was on the floor, which left a lot of us wanting more race, and more race, even before those last 10 games. So, 22 to 26 minutes, depending on, what the flow of the game and his health. But I think his health has been more just, some bad luck of a bad fall and then a couple bad falls in each year. And is that something that's going to happen to him a lot because of the way he plays? Maybe. I don't know that he's injury prone, just had a couple bad situations. But I look for a lot of good things and a lot of improvement from him and a big cog in next year's Indiana basketball season.
Yeah. So Ryan, where do you come down on the injury thing? Because I think that's really, while I don't think he's a 30-minute-a-game guy, really probably under no matter how things shake out, just because you got Brunk and TJD up there. But the injury stuff is really what could swing that number a lot lower, if you think about it that way. So where do you fall on that? The whole idea that some guys are injury-prone, whether that applies to him or not. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
These aren't a bunch of muscle pulls. You know what I mean? Like a guy pulls a muscle a bunch, you're like, well, maybe he's working out too much or maybe his muscles just can't take the beating or he's not hydrating or whatever. There's always some possible underlying issues there. He had a concussion where he slammed his head into the, into the, I think it was the court. That was a practice thing. I remember that. And it was a severe concussion that really bothered him for a while. And then the other time he went up aggressively, got undercut accidentally. It wasn't on purpose, and slammed his back down and had a lower back problem for a couple games. Those are two impact injuries, and maybe it is the way he plays, but they're kind of freak things. This isn't, running down the court normally and his ACL blows up. I mean, this was something that was, an impact injury. And so I think those are kind of chancy. They just happen. And I don't think it's a consistent necessarily problem. Now, if something happens again this year, you think maybe, rein in the way you play a little bit, or you're never going to be on the floor anyway. So it doesn't really matter. But 2 years in a row, he's had that kind of a contact injury. What I would say about him is what was funny and kind of sad about that Michigan State game where he got injured was, you look at the numbers for that game, you're like, 4 points, 4 rebounds. But he did that in 11 minutes. He also had 2 steals, 2 blocks, and an assist. I mean, he was starting to play so well in that game, and then, of course, had the injury and sat out a bit. I think he's a guy who can take that, look at how big he is. And I remember the first time we went to Assembly Hall when he was on the team, he was redshirting, and he walked right by us, and Jared just looked at me. He's like, Race is huge, and he's a big guy, and it doesn't necessarily show. We haven't seen him a whole lot, so it doesn't really show up as much, but he's a big dude. He can take a beating, and we saw last year, he got fouled some, he fouled guys. He was, he took on bigger players and succeeded. And so I think that he's a guy who can take a beating and play through it. It's just the 2 injuries he had were kind of freak things. You slam your back on the floor, I don't care who you are, you're going to be injured from that. And he had a really bad concussion, and of course they were going to be, safe with that. So I'm not too worried about it, but we'll see what happens this year. I mean, something may happen in a few months, and it may change my mind on it.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of break the statistical discussion of him into a couple pieces. The first is here's what you know that you're going to get from him. So, Coach, you talked about this from a guy really playing a role, glue guy role. And interestingly enough, the way that on KenPom they bucket out players based on percentage of possessions used, he falls under the limited roles one just because he doesn't use a ton of possessions. But if you look at the rebounding and defensive numbers, which I think is what we all would view as the baseline for what he's going to bring to the table, his offensive rebounding percentage was 10.7, which puts him on the team second behind TJD, who is at 11.8%, which was good for 102nd nationally. Race didn't play enough minutes to qualify, but between him and Joey, who was at just under 10. And then defensive rebounding wise, Race's was actually the best on the team. He was 22.1%. Trace was next with 21, which ranked him 186. So again, just to kind of give some kind of feel for where Race would slot in. Block rate 5.5 was second on the team behind TJD. And then steals was actually 2.9% steal rate, was the best on the team. Rob Finney was the one who was behind him. So I think those are the things that you feel really good about from a synergy perspective. His overall defensive numbers put him in the 94th percentile. Some of the breakdowns of that I don't know are kind of hard to read much into from a defensive perspective, but grades out by really any measure really well in those areas. So I think those are. And
he can guard multiple positions, which helps you so much.
Yeah, I think that helps. So to me, I think if you're penciling things in terms of like what you can get from guys, those are really the pieces of the equation that you have a really good handle on what you can expect from him. And I think reasonable to expect, maybe the rebounding rates drop a little bit just in a more expanded role. But in general, I think those things are good. So the question that then comes up, and this was, some of I think Patrick had a question, and this is just a general one around offense, but I think that's the question of should you expect more from him offensively in an expanded role? Patrick's question was, does Archie turn Race loose from the top of the key this year? Shot was wide open for him all year, and he could hit it in high school. Somebody had posted a YouTube video of a couple threes that Race hit in a late game situation from around that spot. So that really becomes the next question. He was 3 of 10 from 3 last year. Has shown some ability to hit it, but not consistently. So Ryan, I'll give this one to you first. I mean, what do you think is reasonable to expect from him from let's do the kind of long distance shooting? Can he become more of a stretch four, or in some ways do they need Trace to be able to step out a little bit more and let Race be the one that plays inside?
Well, I'm going to throw a curveball at you. It'd be great if both of them could do it. But no.
After the last few years, we can't expect multiple players to make large jumps from shooting. Right? We can only pick one. That's
I'm dreaming. I will say between the two, Race has done it before. If you look at his high school film, and somebody showed that video today, and it was like, you watch his high school tape, he can do it. And it wasn't always a 3, but he would shoot long 2s. He would shoot mid-range shots and was comfortable there. And sometimes you get on a college campus, you work out a lot, and it changes the mechanics of your shot because you're a lot stronger. And, maybe it's just not, you need to work on it. You need to continue to develop your shot as you get stronger. Your legs get stronger. You might be able to jump a little higher. It might change the timing a little, but you need to continue to work on that. And obviously he's had injuries that have held him from that. Same with, Jerome Hunter, who was a very good shooter in high school. Injuries derail things. And so, he certainly is capable of making long-range shots, and his form on his shot is fine. He twists a little when he shoots, see his right as he follows through his right shoulder will sort of turn his body. That's really the only negative I have about it. But some guys do shoot that way. I mean, that are successful that way. I don't think it's ideal, but I think he could certainly become a decent 3-point shooter. I don't think he's going to be 40+% or anything like that, but if he could step out on the floor and hit 30 to 35% of his threes and be a threat from out there, I mean, that changes Indiana's offense completely, and it opens things up for Trace Jackson-Davis inside, especially if you want to put those two on the floor together. And we have been screaming about getting those two guys on the floor together since last fall, and you started to see it towards the end of the season. They play really well together. They're both two excellent athletic defenders. They both block shots, a lot of shots. And I think the crazy thing about Trace Jackson-Davis that people don't, about Race Thompson that people don't realize is how many steals he got last year in limited time. And you mentioned he had the best steal rate on the team, but there were games where he would have, like against Iowa, he had 4 steals. And against, he would get his hand in passing lanes. He would take the ball away from people. He's a guy who is an aggressive defender, and he's aggressive defensively without fouling too. So all of those things combined can make him a versatile player. And I agree that the shot is part of that, is being able to step out on the floor, and he can handle the ball a little and make passes on the perimeter, and you feel comfortable with him out there. So I really think if he can start knocking down some shots, he really becomes a more complete stretch forward, as you said.
Yeah, I think it's very important too for Coach Miller, if he is capable, to turn him loose. I remember the Illinois game; they were not guarding him at all, not even close, not even closing out. He had 15 feet available, and it looked like the game plan was, "Hey, Race, don't shoot this. We're going to be more patient and work it inside." And sometimes players can take coaching to an extreme as well, where here's the game plan: our post players are going to work from post to post, and we're not going to shoot threes. He's got to have a little bit of the green light to be a stretch four, because I think his form is okay to shoot, and if he hits 30% and takes 20 to 30 shots, I think that's going to stretch the floor a little bit, and he's going to play that four spot. I think that's where he's best. I think TJD and Joey posting up are better options right now, and so I think he can shoot. His form looks good. He just needs to understand, whether it's him or the coach or whoever, get on the same page there with how many, it's like Jerome Hunter never passes up a three. And he's a good shooter, right? And I'm not advocating that for Race, but it's not a situation.
He needs to look more. He didn't look incredibly comfortable sometimes at the top of the key when he get the ball, almost like he's thinking, should I shoot it or no?
Right.
It's got to be a natural.
It's just got to be
catch it knowing you're going to go. Yeah.
If no one's coming out on you, you got to catch, and if you're wide open, let it fly. And this is interesting too that I've learned here in the last few years with our program too, is you could over-teach shot selection. You need to have multiple guys who can shoot, because the teams will scout you and game plan you. If you could coach your way into a defense for the opponent simply by saying, Race Thompson's never going to shoot, we're going to double team Trace and take things away. So sometimes even a missed shot or the threat of a shot is good. And I think his athleticism, he averaged 3.5 points per game. He can get to 8 easily with 2 putbacks a half, a transition, maybe, and maybe a back cut or something like that. That's 4 baskets just from hustle and using his athleticism to get out and go. That's where the offense is going to come from for Race, I think.
And late last year, you saw him get more comfortable posting up as well. You know, when Trace was off the floor, you could see him back to the basket, even have a hook. And even if it didn't go in, it was a good sign. And a couple times, he had a little hook that rimmed out or whatever. But just the comfort level, being able to do that, adds to the comfort level elsewhere. He knows he can do it. And once you get into a guy's mind who has the ability that Race has, you get into their mind that, I can do this. And they start taking it to the next level. It was like once Jerome Hunter started hitting some shots, then you saw him drive a little. Then you saw him, do other things. So it's having a little bit of success for a guy who hasn't done it for a long period of time really helps build the rest of his game as well. As Jerome Hunter started making shots, you started seeing him play defense better. It just plugs you into the whole game. And as Race started having success defensively, he started playing a little smarter and a little better offensively. And you saw those numbers tick up. So it's all kind of interconnected. I know we talk offensively and defensively separately, but a lot of times those things feed each other. And the post and the perimeter can feed each other. If you get good at one, you start to feel confidence about the other. So for him, it's really going to be about finding a way to just get going and getting locked in. And, of course, just get shots up all summer. He's healthy. You should be getting shots up all summer.
Using that athleticism offensively, he's already doing it defensively in my mind, but use that athleticism, whether it's on the break, whatever, to increase his production there would really be great for the offensive output.
Yeah, I think when you look at some of the numbers from an offensive standpoint, it backs up a lot of what you said, Coach. And I think it's one of those where everybody wants to see him step out and be able to make threes. But I think he does need to be a threat, but the numbers kind of show what he was really effective at. And I think in a complementary role, I'm not sure how much of those things change. So if you look in synergy, his best, most effective offenses were being the roll man in a pick and roll scenario where he was in the 94th percentile, in transition where he was in the 83rd percentile, and then on putbacks where he was in the 73rd percentile. I think, Coach, you touched on at least a couple of those of these are some easy ways to get buckets and just be in the right spot. I think the rebounding numbers would suggest the putbacks are almost a given with what he had. Where he wasn't effective was post-ups, and I was a little bit surprised to see this. And now, granted, it's 20 possessions that they charted as post-up, so it's not a huge sample size, but I did feel like he became more comfortable in that scenario. But he ranked in the 12th percentile in post-ups. And then if you just look raw shooting percentages on twos, he was 34 of 70 on the year, so just under 50%. as Big Ten play hit, he was only 21 of 50, so 42% on twos there. And then against Tier A competition, the way that Ken Pom defines those, he was 11 of 27 on twos. So the numbers there are not great, but I also think they're suggestive of a guy who, no matter what happens, he's not going to be, the first or second option on the floor to shoot anyway, probably not even the third. So in that regard, I don't know that those are concerning. I think some of that is experience, and he got more experience last year. Hopefully you see him finish a little bit better around the basket on his twos, and some of those kinds of things. He did show a knack to get fouled, had a high free throw rate, made just 66% from the line, but did a good job of getting there. So I think there are some pieces there offensively. I think it's, in some ways, if you want to go through and try to find the idealized version of this team, then you're like, yeah, he starts to be able to step out and knock down threes consistently. I don't know that that's 100% necessary, that if he continues to build on the strengths that he had offensively last year, that can be enough to get him up into that 8-point a game range and 8 rebounds. And I think you're super happy with that as a complimentary guy who doesn't need the ball in his hands to really make things happen a lot, and can just be that complimentary piece. So I think that is how I see it, and kind of the statistics bear that out.
And the stats are nice because they show what he needs to work on. But he also was the 4th post-up option on Indiana last year. You had Davis in there too. You had Joey Brunk getting a lot of post moves. And he really didn't get a lot of possessions in any of these synergy stats.
Absolutely not.
But his athleticism was where he shined. The pick and roll, on the move, transition, the putback hustle plays. That's where a role player can get points. He has to get better at post-ups and the spot up, but I believe he can do that. Sometimes stats don't show that he can't do it, so you go away from him. It's just he's going to be need to do that, and that's where the improvement needs to come. I believe he can hit three-pointers. His spot-up synergy numbers should be better, and I believe he showed at the end of the year he was able to make some post moves at the beginning of the year. So I think those numbers will just automatically go up, and if he gets a good offseason in, those numbers, those synergy numbers of points per possession will go up because he's going to be more part of the scheme as opposed to, being the 3rd, 4th post player in, just trying to get some minutes and do what he does athletically.
Yeah, and if you look at last year, 2 of his best games were in the win over 21st ranked Iowa, where he had 10 points, 4 rebounds, but he had 4 steals, 2 blocks, and was all over the floor in 24 minutes, which I think was a season high at that time in minutes for him. And then at Minnesota, where he had 9 points, 10 rebounds, a block, a steal. He was all over the floor in that game, and they won at the barn. And then some of the other games, I mean, he was the only guy who played well against Purdue at Mackey. He had 6 points, 8 rebounds, 2 blocks, 2 steals. I mean, he was the only one playing with any energy in that game. And then in the Wisconsin game at the end of the year at home, where Indiana should have won that game. There's no reason. You go back and watch that. There's no reason they should have lost that game. He had 7 points and 11 rebounds. So he was a guy who stepped up and actually helped Indiana, stay in games and stay competitive, and in some cases win games. So I think that it's worth noting that when he plays well, Indiana's in a good position almost every time. And so getting him more minutes and getting him to play that 20 to 25 minutes that he played sort of down the stretch last season is critically important to Indiana moving forward because of how much he can do on a floor to help you defensively, and then as we see the offense blossom as well.
And his improvement doesn't have to be great for his role, but I think it's going to be there, and he can double his points, get up to 7 to 8 easily, and see those percentages where he was weaker last year, his field goal percentage and some of those things improve enough to get 8 points and 6-7 rebounds a game and really be a contributor.
All right, so kind of to wrap things up with Race, with Justin leaving, I think even before that there were questions about whether Race would make his way into the starting lineup. We know Archie's been, one to really stick with guys there. So, Ryan, I'll throw this to you first. Do you think he's starting to begin the season, and do you think he's starting to end the season?
I would say starting to end the season. I don't know about the beginning. We'll see. I mean, so much is up in the air because of the coronavirus. I think some guys are going to come back and be much improved. Some guys are going to come back and be sort of where they were and need to work on some stuff. So it's going to depend. I think by the end of the year, he's going to be an invaluable player for Indiana. Although who knows if it depends on what they decide to do. If they want to go with more of a wing at that 4 spot, like a Hunter, or if they want to go with a true 4, we'll see. But I think he's going to be playing a lot of minutes from the jump regardless.
Coach? I think for me, Race is a starter, but sometimes you just don't start. There's other reasons, a Joey Brunk come in might have changed the program with his attitude and effort, and you roll with the starting lineup. I may disagree with that, but you got to honor that. Each coach has their own philosophy, and you might want to play TJD a little bit at the 4. If he comes back and can hit a 15-footer, can pick and pop to the 15, 16-foot range and hit a jumper, he could play some 4. And so you have those guys on a rotation. But I'm a big fan of Race, and I think you got to put your athletic people out there and your studs out there. And I don't mean any disrespect to Joey. I think Joey's going to get 20 minutes a game, but I thought Indiana played better when he was anywhere from 14 to 20 as opposed to getting over 20, and Race got a few more of those minutes and Deron Davis got a few more of those minutes. Joey does a lot of good Joey things, but I think Race is a better player overall.
He fits better too. Let's be
honest.
Yes,
with watching. I went back and watched some of the Dayton's stuff in Archie Miller at clinics, and they run 4 to the 3-point line on breaks, and then one post player either drag screening or rim running. And at times I went back and watched Indiana. We're running 2 posts. Because that's where the strength was. But maybe they get back to a little bit more of that spread, and you can run Race out a little bit wider on a break. So I think he should start. But sometimes I guess I would agree with Ryan. I think by the end of the year, maybe he is starting, but he's going to get good run regardless of whether he starts or not.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that given the way Archie's played it in the past, it seems potentially unlikely that he'd be there to start the season, but I think he's going to be on the floor a lot at the end of games, and that may be enough to get him into a starting spot by the time the season's over. But time will tell on that. But certainly a guy that we're excited about as we look forward to next season. So coming up on our third segment, we'll answer your questions, including one for Ryan about sports journalism and another from Jared, who put in a question in his own absence. So we'll be back with those here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
Hi, this is James Blackman Jr. I never miss an open 3, and I never miss an episode of the Assembly Call. Go Hoosiers!
Thank you, James, and welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and the coach Brian Tonsoni. And remember, you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason, and after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. It's now time for our mailbag. All questions, as usual, were submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com/community. The first question was actually from Jared. He just still wanted to be part of the show, even though he wasn't here. So his question, how many players will average more than 12 points per game this season? Trace and ... Coach, I'll throw that to you first. Anybody else get over that mark? Is this a balanced team that has a bunch of guys in that middle range, or do you think somebody else joins Trace at over 12 a game?
Man, I'm thinking down the roster, and I don't know that I see a 12-point scorer on the lot. And then that starts to get me to worry about where the offensive points are coming from. But maybe it is going to be balanced. You would like to have a secondary scorer and a secondary scorer that's consistent. I'm trying to look up how many did Devontae get last year. I don't know. Was he over 12?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now. He was at 10.8.
Yeah, he was second, correct?
Yep, he was second at 10.8. Justin was third at 10.4.
Yeah. So I'm going to see the Indiana offense be a lot better, but it's still going to be spread out with potential. Obviously, Hunter, if he really expands and can play major minutes and make that jump, his ability to, hit some threes, which gets points built up. He would be a candidate for that, and maybe a guard. I don't see Rob doing it. Maybe Xander, but he's got a long way to go as a young guy too. So I'd say 2 at the most. If you get 3, we're really having great post-game shows.
Yeah, I'm saying it's going to be Al Durham. He's going to get over 12 points this year. He was playing really well at the end of last year. He got 9.8 last year anyway, which surprises me. I didn't think. But the thing is he hits his free throws too. I think he's going to see the line a lot more as a senior. So I would guess that's who it's going to be of the current roster guys. We don't know what we're going to see from Christian Lander, how good he's going to be when he hits campus, because again, reclassifying sort of changes the calculus especially for a point guard. So we'll see. I don't think Rob's going to get there. I think Rob will score more, but I don't think than his 7.3 from last year, but I don't think he'll get over 12. So I would pick Trace, and I think Trace's number is going to go up considerably. He was at 13.5 last year. I think he's going to be around 15. And so that leaves fewer points for everybody else, assuming he might score some more, but I think there's also a deeper team there to score.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, Ryan. I think if anybody else does, it would be Al. And I think really regardless of that, you're going to have a number of guys in that 8 to 10 point range where, we talked about Race as a potential 8-point guy. I think that's reasonable for Rob. I think that's reasonable for Jerome in an expanded role. Lander's the wild card, a little bit of how quickly he's able to come along, but then you throw Al in that mix. So I don't know. I kind of went through the range of thoughts that you did, Coach, of, boy, I don't really know. And is that a bad thing? But I think there's a little bit of the roster balance that been hoping for over some of these recent seasons. So I'll say if anybody does it besides Trace, it's going to be Al. But I think he'd probably be pretty close to it, depending upon that. I'm sure we can go back to doing our Al Durham player preview, and I probably said he wasn't going to get to 12 points. So I'm just covering myself on all around here. So Ryan, we got this question that was directed at you. It came from James. What do you think the long-term future looks like for sports journalism, particularly for college basketball, given recent events at the Athletic and other places? You're talking on mute.
Sorry,
future of sports journalism is bleak when we don't unmute ourselves.
No, the first thing I said was and then I was like, oh, I'm muted. So no, I think that it's really tough to say. A lot of us don't know, and a lot of people involved in the business are kind of, we don't know. The Athletic has a subscription-based model, which is interesting, and it's sort of a new thing to try, and had been doing really well. But we don't know the numbers there because they don't release them publicly. But sort of had been doing well, and obviously, the pandemic crushed a lot of this business and made it really difficult because it dried up advertising, and there was no sports to advertise during, and no big tent events to sort of build up your coverage around. It's been a struggle. I mean, day to day, we're trying to find things to write about, and it's a struggle. It's getting a little bit better now as we have some more sports news and stuff. But it really is going to be interesting. Does somebody, one of the issues is when things went to the internet, nobody knew how to market on the internet. Nobody knows how to make money on the internet. It's advertisers aren't paying as much for ads as they did when it was a newspaper-based system. What I would tell people is if you like good sports journalism, support your local paper, subscribe to it. That's definitely a great start so they can build out their newsrooms. I mean, the more subscribers they have, the more money they're going to spend on their product. And I would say subscribe to things like The Athletic or any other subscription services if you want to see better coverage. The more money you put into it, the more money they can put into their coverage. And that's the way it works. Also, visit a lot of sites during the day. Click on articles, read them, because obviously the more traffic they get, the more they can expand. So that's what I would say if you're a fan of sports journalism is interact with it and make sure you're going out and actually involving yourself in the content.
Yeah, I think, it's just interesting. The Athletic had grown so fast, and I'm going to start this and probably not be able to finish this thought. It had such great coverage for so many teams. When all of that just goes away so quickly, I think it's hard to read a ton into it just because so many things happen that are out of the ordinary that I don't know what conclusions we can really jump to, but that's coming from more of an outsider's perspective. But
you're pretty on.
Either way, that will do it for the show tonight, and we appreciate everybody being here. If you would If you wanted to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing most of the music you hear on the show, and thank you for listening. I'll talk to you again next Thursday night. Till then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.